Prussia was undoubtedly one of the most important actors in Europe's early and late modern periods. It has a fascinating history, and geographically and politically, up until the early 18th century, it did not make much sense for Prussia to become a kingdom. And in total, the kingdom would only exist independently for 170 years before becoming part of the German Empire in 1871. By the late 17th century, the territories that would eventually become the Kingdom of Prussia were still disjointed. Brandenburg lay at the center, north within the Holy Roman Empire. To the west were the duchies of Cleves, Mark, and Ravensberg. The Hohenzollerns, Brandenburg-Prussia's ruling dynasty, inherited these some 70 years earlier. And to the far east, on the southeast coast of the Baltic Sea, was the Duchy of Prussia. Although ruling over the territories within the Holy Roman Empire as a sovereign, on paper electors were still subservient to the emperor. As for the Duchy of Prussia, it lay outside the Holy Roman Empire, but the Hohenzollerns merely held it as a fief from the Polish king. Around the mid-17th century, developments began taking place that would lead to Prussia becoming a kingdom. The 30 Years' War lasting from 1618 to 48 ravaged the Holy Roman Empire and its principalities. Frederick Wilhelm, the Great Elector, ascended to the throne in 1640, and he did everything he could to rebuild Brandenburg. The population was replenished with edicts of religious toleration, and they attracted an influx of immigrants. Attracting French subsidies ensured the rebuild of Brandenburg-Prussia's army. That rebuilding of the army led to a remarkable feat. 9 years after the 30 Years' War ended, in 1657, the Elector managed to obtain sovereignty over East Prussia. So, how exactly did he pull that off? The Second Northern War broke out in 1655 between Sweden, under the ambitious Charles X Gustav, and Polish Lithuania, Denmark-Norway, and the Moscow Tsardom. By this time, the Elector expanded his army to between 10 and 20,000 soldiers, quite a contrast to his territory's burning mess even 7 years earlier. Initially, the Elector allied himself with Royal Prussia, ruled by the Polish king in personal union. Sweden initially emerged victorious after several battles. The Polish king was forced into exile, and Sweden began marching their troops into Ducal Prussia. Upon realizing that he would not win against Sweden, the Elector agreed to Swedish peace terms instead. He now accepted Ducal Prussia as a fief from the Swedish, instead of the Polish king. In turn, he had to supply the Swedish with troops. In July 1656, a combined Swedish-Prussian force routed the Polish-Lithuanian army at the Battle of Warsaw. Yet the tide of war was slowly turning against the Swedes, and in turn, for more troops and aid, the Swedish king agreed to grant the Elector actual sovereignty over Ducal Prussia. The thing is, within too long, even those extra troops didn't make a difference, and the Poles expelled Sweden. So, the promise of sovereignty over Ducal Prussia was meaningless. The Polish king was back in the saddle. Fortunately for the Elector, a conflict between the Russian Tsar and Polish king came up. Casimir decided it would be best to neutralize Brandenburg, so he wouldn't have to worry about the Elector. Coincidentally, Emperor Ferdinand III died in April 1657. Electors of the Holy Roman Empire could cast their vote for the new emperor. Now, our Elector saw a possible great trade-off. He traded his vote for the new emperor for concessions over Ducal Prussia from the Polish king. In September at Wehlau, a secret treaty was signed where Ducal Prussia was ceded with absolute power to the Elector. In turn, the Elector changed sides and waged war against his former allies, the Swedes. A steamroll campaign followed, and by 1659 Brandenburg-Prussia controlled nearly all of Swedish Pomerania. But the French came to back up Sweden and prevented the Elector from conquering these new territories. Not too long after, in February 1660, the King of Sweden died. The war participants signed the Peace of Oliva, concluding the Second Northern War. The treaty confirmed the international recognition of the Elector's sovereignty over Ducal Prussia, a significant acquisition. Following this bloody war, one of the Hohenzollerns' territories had become fully sovereign. When the Great Elector passed away in 1688 after reigning over his lands for 48 years, his son Frederick inherited many disjointed territories from the Rhineland all the way to the eastern Baltic. His father was able to see the Promised Land, but not enter it. Frederick wasn't the heir apparent for all his life. His older brother, Charles Emile, commanded an army during the Franco-Dutch War in the 1670s when he fell ill and passed away. The bond between Frederick and his father was strained, to say the least. In 1687 he ran away, fearful that his father's new wife wanted to poison him. Still, they resolved the dispute right before his father's death, and when he passed away, Frederick succeeded him as Frederick III, Elector of Brandenburg and Duke of Prussia. As he ascended, the 9-year war broke out between France and an alliance of Austria, the Dutch Republic, England, among other states, and the duchies of Brandenburg-Prussia. Being a son of an Oranje-Nassau, Frederick became one of the most loyal allies of William III of Orange. While Brandenburg and Prussia were safe from war, the duchies in the west under Hohenzollern control did see warfare. Frederick visited the Dutch Republic twice during that time, with the war being concluded in 1697. During these years, something else was brewing in the background, something that would characterize Frederick's reign. At least from 1696 onwards, Frederick actively pursued diplomatic negations towards a goal that would change the position of House Hohenzollern forever. He wanted to acquire a royal title, but acquiring the title of king wasn't as clear-cut as it may seem, and for years Frederick embarked on painstaking negotiations with multiple influential parties on the European theatre. Now, to understand how an elector of the Holy Roman Empire would be able to crown himself king, we have to go back to the Treaty of Westphalia, by this point signed nearly half a century ago. The conditions of the treaty that ended the 30 Years' War curtailed, if not destroyed, the power of the Holy Roman Emperor. The prestige of the office had eroded. German princes virtually became sovereigns of their estates, and they certainly felt like it. Yet it was forbidden for anyone to hold the title of king within the empire. It would be an unwise provocation that would certainly warrant a military response if an elector suddenly crowned himself king within the empire. It was not until Napoleonic times, a century later, that the kings of Bavaria, Saxony and Württemberg came into existence, and their ascension to the throne signaled the real end of empire. Within the Holy Roman Empire, only 2 royal titles were permitted, that of King of the Romans, held by the Emperor, and King of Bohemia. But some electors of the empire were kings of territories outside of the empire. They made use of a loophole, so to say. Royal crowns of foreign territories were acquired to boost the prestige of a house. Thus, for example, Augustus II, the Strong of House Wettin, was Elector of Saxony, but became King of Poland in 1697 when he was elected as such. George I of House Welf was King of Great Britain from 1714, whilst also being Elector of Hanover. As Frederick III became the new elector, he now doubled as both an elector within the empire and a sovereign over Duke of Prussia. The opportunity to become king presented itself, just like it had to the Welfs and Wettins. The negotiations began during the 1690s, and it would take several years of complex and tricky talks between him and both Emperor Leopold I and Augustus the Strong, King of Poland. As often happened in the history of Prussia, the elector owed a good fortune to international developments he had no control over. In 1700, over in Habsburg Spain, Charles II passed away without children. As a result, several monarchs claimed the right to the Spanish throne, a dispute that would eventually lead to the War of the Spanish Succession between the Habsburgs, Bourbons, and their allies. Frederick had supported a candidate for the Spanish throne, Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, hoping he would manage to gain a royal title through that channel. And, well, Leopold did require the elector's support when that war finally broke out. Frederick exploited this, and in return for the Krontraktat, the Crown Treaty, the elector eventually pledged his support for the emperor. He supplied 8,000 soldiers, and in return the emperor acknowledged the royal title. The elector had a more difficult time convincing Augustus the Strong, King of Poland, to acknowledge his royal title. In fact, Augustus declared the coronation illegal and reasoned Duke of Prussia still belonged to Poland. The elector had to concede a bit here, which led to the pretty unusual title of King in Prussia. Augustus made sure the elector was aware of his subservient position to his. After all, Poland still laid claim to Western Royal Prussia, and Augustus wasn't eager to give Frederick any reason to assert a claim to that territory. There were others that opposed the coronation. The papacy and the Teutonic Order did not recognize Frederick's ambition to acquire the title either. Frederick's ancestor, Duke Albrecht, was the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order. In 1525, controlling the territory which now was the duchy, he simply split off from the Teutonic Order and declared himself Duke of the region. As such, they had not even recognized Duke Albrecht's secularization of the territory nearly 200 years before. Perhaps the influence of the order was already waning. As far as we know, their loud objections did not matter. Frederick III, Elector of Brandenburg, Duke of Prussia, managed to push through his plans to acquire the first royal title for House Hohenzollern. On the 18th of January 1701, Elector Frederick III of Brandenburg was crowned in Königsberg. It was an event full of splendor, riches and grandiosity. The coronation was the most expensive single event in the history of Brandenburg Prussia. Around twice the annual revenue of the entire Hohenzollern administration was spent on the ceremony. And Frederick, well, he was henceforth known as Frederick I, king in Prussia. An interesting detail is that this second wife, the cultured Sophie Charlotte, Princess of Hanover, opposed the coronation as she figured it was against Hanoverian interests, and during the coronation she found it boring to the degree that she distracted herself with snuff. Nevertheless, Frederick first crowned himself and then his wife, a symbolic gesture of worldly power and House Hohenzollern's superior position compared to all other German dynasties. The Hohenzollern territories were from this moment on simply referred to as Prussia, even though the majority of their lands lay outside of Prussia. Thank you very much for watching this video. If there's a topic or event you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also really like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you will already gain access to exclusive Patreon videos. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.